I welcome you all to my channel, Dabgist TV. Thank you for watching, and I bring us live update from the funeral of the Queen Elizabeth. This is a live update. Please kindly watch to the end, and in this video you're going to find Prince William, how he got emotional about the funeral, and it's very emotional for the world, everyone in the country and England as a whole. May the Queen so rest in perfect peace, and please share this video out, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and also watch this video to the end. Thank you.
To a close at Westminster Abbey in London, UK. Now, about 500 leaders and dignitaries from the UK and around the world are at Westminster Abbey, and they've just watched the service. Many members of foreign royal families are sitting opposite the British royal family in the church as the state funeral service of Queen Elizabeth II comes to a close at Westminster Abbey in London, UK. Queen Margaret II of Denmark was sitting directly opposite King Charles, Europe's longest-serving monarch, facing its newest. Now, the second procession will take place shortly, the journey through central London, when the cortege led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police will be made up of 7 groups, each with its own band, members of the armed services from the UK and the Commonwealth. The police and the NHS will be involved and is expected to leave the Abbey shortly and last about 45 minutes. The procession from Westminster Abbey to Wellington Ark is split into 7 groups, each with its own band. The Queen's coffin, topped with the Royal Standard and Imperial State Crown, will be at the centre of the procession, carried on the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy. And that carriage was last seen in 1979 for the funeral of Prince Philip's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, and was used for the Queen's father, George VI, in 1952. A bird's-eye view of the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II as the state funeral has just come to a close and is now being moved out of the Abbey for the second procession, the journey through central London, headed for Wellington Ark. The Queen will be accompanied by the bearer party of the Grenadier Guards, the King's bodyguards of the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen at Arms, the Yeomen of the Guard, and the Royal Company of Archers. Senior members of the royal family, including the new King and his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, will follow behind. They will be joined by members of the royal household. Bird's eye view from inside Westminster Abbey as the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II is being carried out on its way on a second procession. And there we have members of the royal family following closely behind. The new King, Charles III, his sons Prince William and Prince Harry, Camilla, the Queen Consort, the Princess of Wales, the Countess of Wessex and the Duchess of Sussex will join the procession in cars. Behind them will be Princess Beatrice and Eugene, the daughters of Prince Andrew. Following closely behind the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II is Queen Consort Camilla, King Charles III, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and Princess Anne. This is live coverage from Westminster Abbey in London, UK, as the state funeral service of Queen Elizabeth II has just come to a close. And the procession is ready now to bear the Queen's coffin away from the Abbey. During the service, the gentle sound of hymns, well sung, seeped through the stone walls and stained glass window of the Abbey to the outside. The congregation inside listened to the addresses and prayers for the Queen. The Royal Navy sailors who pulled the state gun carriage bearing her coffin reformed outside the Great West Door, ready to take her onwards back through Parliament Square and up Whitehall and the Mall. Here we can see the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II being carried out of Westminster Abbey, where her state funeral was just held, followed by senior members of the royal family, including the new King, Charles III, and his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. You can see there Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, Camilla the Queen Consort, the Princess of Wales, the Countess of Wessex, the Duchess of Sussex are joining the procession, following closely behind the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II as she's being taken out of Westminster Abbey. The Queen's coffin there is topped with the Royal Standard, an Imperial State Crown. It was carried on the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey, where we just witnessed her state funeral. She's being carried out of Westminster Abbey to slowly begin the second procession through central London, when the cortege, led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, will be made up of 7 groups, each with its own band. Members of the armed services from the UK and the Commonwealth, the police and the NHS will also be involved, and is expected to leave the Abbey and is leaving the Abbey as we speak. The coffin of Queen Elizabeth II is being carried out of Westminster Abbey as her state funeral has just come to a close. We can see there she's followed by King Charles III, Camilla, Queen Consort, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, Prince Andrew, followed by the Prince of Wales, Princess of Wales, Countess of Wessex and Duchess of Sussex, as the Queen is being taken out of Westminster Abbey. Now, a handwritten card on top of the Queen's coffin reads, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R." Now, this is just outside Westminster Abbey as the coffin is being taken out following the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. And there her coffin is topped with the Royal Standard and Imperial State Crown. Now, the Queen's coffin will be drawn in a walking procession from Westminster Abbey to Wellington Arch at London's Hyde Park Corner. This is live coverage from outside Westminster Abbey, where the funeral service has just come to a close. Now, with the route lined with military personnel and police, Big Ben will toll at 1-minute intervals as the procession moves slowly through the streets of the capital. Gun salutes will also fire every minute from Hyde Park, and people can watch the procession in person from designated viewing areas along the route. This is the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II coming to an end, her coffin just being carried out of Westminster Abbey. Now, this is the next procession from Westminster Abbey to Wellington Arch. The procession, led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, will be made up of 7 groups, each with its own band. Members of the armed services from the UK and the Commonwealth, the police and NHS will also be involved. And once again, the King will lead members of the royal family walking behind the gun carriage, bearing the Queen's coffin. Camilla, the Queen Consort, the Princess of Wales, the Countess of Wessex and the Duchess of Sussex will join the procession in cars. Now, once at Wellington Arch, the coffin will be transferred to the new State Hearse for its final journey to Windsor Castle. This is the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II. Her state funeral has just come to an end, and the coffin will be on a walking procession, on a second procession from Westminster Abbey. And there we can see the coffin topped with the Royal Standard and Imperial State Crown. Again, the coffin topped with the Royal Standard and Imperial State Crown will be at the centre of the procession, carried on the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy. The second procession is about to begin following the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. This is just outside Westminster Abbey. The bearer party is now carrying the Queen's coffin, or just carried the Queen's coffin rather, back through Westminster Abbey and out of the Great West Door. It has been placed on the gun state gun carriage ready for the procession from the Abbey to Wellington Arch. The second procession has just begun. And it's heading from Westminster Abbey to Wellington Arch. She's accompanied by the bearer party of the Grenadier Guards, the King's Bodyguards of the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen at Arms, the Yeomen of the Guard and the Royal Company of Archers. This is the second procession following the state funeral service at Westminster Abbey, headed for Wellington Arch. And senior members of the royal family, including the new king and his sons Prince William and Prince Harry, will follow behind. The Queen Consort, the Princess of Wales, the Countess of Wessex and the Duchess of Sussex will join the procession in cars. Behind them will be Princess Beatrice and Eugene, the daughters of Prince Andrew. And there we can see Londoners have lined the streets there to get a glimpse during the procession, the funeral procession of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in the history of Europe. Now we continue to bring you live coverage from the streets of London as the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II has just left Westminster Abbey. This is the second procession that has begun. It's a larger parade than the one seen earlier, where 7 groups, each comprising members of the armed forces, Camilla, the Queen Consort, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, will follow in a car directly behind the King and other senior royals who will again walk behind the coffin. A second vehicle will take Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and Sophie, Countess of Wessex. Mounties from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are leading the procession at the very front. The Queen's coffin is again flanked by a bearer party, pallbearers and bodyguards, and world leaders are also heading to a reception hosted by Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. Now we'll continue to bring you live coverage from London as the second procession of the carrying of Queen Elizabeth II's coffin is continuing as we speak. We'll bring you more updates on that throughout the coming hour, but for the minute we'll have a look at the rest of the world news. Britain and the world will lay Queen Elizabeth II to rest on Monday at a state funeral that drew presidents and kings, princes and prime ministers, as well as up to 1 million people lining the streets of London to say final goodbye to a monarch whose 70-year reign defined an age.
World leaders descended on London on Sunday to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth on the eve of her state funeral. U.S. President Joe Biden, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro and Canada's Justin Trudeau were among a host of world leaders in the British capital ahead of the funeral service on Monday. Biden among scores of dignitaries and royals from Europe, Asia, Africa and the Americas who have arrived in London for Monday's funeral, said the Queen's death at 96 years of age had left a giant hole on the global stage.
She's going to be with him every step of the way.
He said he had consoled the Queen's heir, King Charles, that the Queen would be with him every step of the way, every minute, every moment, and that's a reassuring notion. Hundreds of thousands of people have flooded London to bid farewell to Britain's longest reigning monarch, with people from all walks of life from around the country and overseas queuing for hours to file past her coffin in a solemn stream. Biden followed other world leaders in appearing on a balcony overlooking the coffin in the vast, historic Westminster Hall, making a sign of the cross and briefly placing his hand on his heart in reverence. The U.S. president later joined Charles and other leaders for an evening reception ahead of the state funeral.
Speaking at a dinner held by the Turkish-American National Steering Committee in New York on Sunday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan praised Turkey's efforts to contribute to peace and security across the world.
Türkiye ve Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nin iki güçlü stratejik ortak ve 70 yıllık müttefik olarak aralarında çözemeyeceği hiçbir sorun yoktur.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan attended a dinner held by the Turkish-American National Steering Committee in New York on Sunday.
Milli güvenliğimizi ilgilendiren meselelerde bazı görüş ayrılıkları yaşasak da birçok bölgesel ve küresel meselede benzer tutumlara sahibiz.
Turkey and the United States have extensive relations at every level on bilateral, regional and global issues. The two NATO allies, however, have been at loggerheads with one another over several developments.
Amerikalı dostlarımızın PKK, YPG ve FETÖ ile mücadelemizde müttefiklik ruhuna yakışır şekilde işbirliği içinde hareket etmesini bekliyoruz. FETÖ elebaşının ve örgüt mensuplarının Türk adaletine teslim edilmesi için Amerikan makamları nezdindeki girişimlerimizi titizlikle yürütüyoruz.
Turkey has started to take new steps regarding the remaining parts of the works, which it launched to create 30 kilometers deep secure zones along its borders with Syria. An operation against the PKK terror group's Syrian offshoot PYD and YPG is expected to start as soon as the Turkish military forces, intelligence and security units complete their preparations.
PKK, YPG'den DAEŞ'e ve FETÖ'ye kadar hiçbir ayrım yapmadan tüm terör örgütleriyle mücadelemizi kararlılıkla sürdürüyoruz, sürdüreceğiz. Terörün kanlı ve karanlık gölgesini bölgemizin üzerinden muhakkak kaldıracağız.
Turkey is celebrating the 70th anniversary of its membership to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. During the Cold War era and after, Turkey has been one of the responsible and leading members of the alliance.
Gerek parada, gerek kara gücünde bütün bu destekleri veren en önemli ülkelerden ilk 5 ülkeden bir tanesi Türkiye. Öyleyse Türkiye'nin konumu gayet iyi anlaşılmalı, iyi bilinmeli ve kararlar, adımlar buna göre atılmalıdır.
Turkey firmly believes that the difficulties faced by Ukraine and Russia can be settled in a sustainable and durable manner only peacefully within the political sphere and through cooperation, coordination and inclusive dialogue. Turkey proactively pursues sustainable solutions that are in line with the realities on the ground and with the expectations of the Ukrainian and Russian people.
Türkiye olarak savaşın diplomasi yoluyla sonuçlandırılmasına, bölgesel ve küresel ölçekteki menfi etkilerinin giderilmesine yönelik çabalarımızı önümüzdeki dönemde de sürdüreceğiz. Özellikle tabii Ukrayna tahılının Karadeniz üzerinden ihraç edilmesi amacıyla Birleşmiş Milletler'le birlikte yürüttüğümüz gayretler sonucunda sağlanan İstanbul mutabakatı bu çabaların en somut örneğidir. Burada yakaladığımız olumlu iklimi önce ateşkese, ardından da kalıcı barışa tahvil etmeyi istiyoruz.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will participate in the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York this week and is expected to reiterate his call for an urgent reform to the Security Council structure. The United Nations is an international organisation established to prevent the repetition of wars that broke out in the first half of the 20th century and to eliminate threats to international peace and security. Turkey pursues a proactive approach towards the United Nations, striving to contribute effectively to all major issues on the agenda. Benefiting from its membership in different groups and organisations, Turkey makes every effort to play a constructive and reconciliatory role in the United Nations.
Daha adil bir dünya mümkün diyerek de insan, adalet, hak, hukuk ve eşitlik eksenli bir sisteme olan ihtiyacı dile getiriyoruz. Türkiye'nin çağrılarının sistemin mağdur ettiği coğrafyalar başta olmak üzere ciddi bir makes bulduğunu müşahede ediyoruz.
Turkey gives utmost importance to the UN as the only global organisation that establishes norms for dealing with the problems multilaterally.
Sophia Luss.
God bless you, Your Royal Highness. God bless you, Your Royal